thing about Vatican II that I thought was interesting when you're looking at the development of Roman Catholic thought in the area of just war is that the two huge things that happened in the 20th century, I think I mentioned this already, were the two world wars and the advent of nuclear technology. That's had a gigantic effect on how to deal with war, issues of war and peace, and when is it okay to go to war, and can you even fight a just war when you have nuclear weapons that don't discriminate, okay, that don't discriminate between non-combatants and soldiers.
Well, if you don't use the nuclear weapons.
Okay, but if you don't use the nuclear weapons, can you threaten with nuclear weapons? Is that
Ooh, no.
These are the big issues, right? And this is the issue the Roman Catholic Church has struggled with. With Vatican II, what they did, number one, they explicitly for the first time addressed pacifism as a legitimate alternative. Now, I don't say for the first time. Well, some of the earlier popes had said it was okay. Some of the earlier popes had said it was wrong. In fact, as late as 1956, I think it was Pius.
Well.
Yes, okay, thank you. In his Christmas message in 1956, he specifically said that once your state makes a determination to go to war, if it's a lawful war, the individual soldier has no right to question that and to raise conscientious objection. That was as late as 1956. Now, I would love to see, I only saw an excerpt of that quote, I would love to see the context of when he said that, because this is post-World War II, you know. So there's got to be some, but it was interesting to note that he put the burden, he took the right, or he took the option away from the Roman Catholic soldier of raising conscientious objection if the decision was made, now by whom I don't know, that you were in a just war. Okay, I thought that was interesting. But regardless, by Vatican II, which was only a few years later, the pacifist voice, which I do think Dorothy Day and even Thomas Merton had an impact on, the pacifist voice was loud enough that the Roman Catholic Church determined that it was a legitimate alternative within the Roman Catholic Church. Okay.
Is there a document for that?
Yes. Yeah, I have a quote from the Vatican II documents, and I can give you the exact location of where that is. I didn't write it in my notes, so just
yeah,
remind me.
I don't remember reading anything about pacifism.
Yeah, what they said was something to the effect of making humane provisions for the case of those who refuse to bear arms, provided, however, that they accept some other form of service to the human community.
Okay, they're not talking about a soldier, because a soldier is already bearing arms.
Okay, what I do know about Vatican II, and I can double check this, is that for the first time, the idea of serving as the idea of pacifism was to some degree accepted. Now, this is what I believe I understood from what I read this week, but I could be wrong about that. It seemed to be what it was saying. But that's not the only thing. The other thing we talk about nuclear attacks is that Vatican II specifically for the first time moved to absolutely preclude attacks by nuclear weapons on civilians. Now we may think, well, of course they did. But remember, this was still, there were huge issues in the church, not just the Roman Catholic, but the Protestant and of course the Anglican Church as well, on what do we do with these nukes? We can't really use them. That seems to be a problem. You know, can we? It doesn't seem like that doesn't seem to be in comport with just war. Can we threaten nuclear weapons? Can we threaten that which we can't really use? Is that moral, or is that okay? Now, the other thing about Vatican II is it called for progressive disarmament of nuclear weapons. Okay. Now, it's interesting to note that in the National Conference of Catholic Bishops letter in 1983, it's called The Challenge of Peace, written by U.S. bishops. It's considered to be, in the Roman Catholic Church, among pacifists especially, it's considered to be sort of a pro-pacifist document. Although I wouldn't say that because it lays out the theological, the criteria for just war and the theological reasons. In that letter, there was sort of an uneasy balance that they struck between the idea that maybe nuclear deterrence is okay, but the use of nuclear weapons is clearly not okay. It's just an issue that the church has dealt with these past 50, 60, 70 years since we had this new weapon that doesn't discriminate in any way.
But it seems to me that the argument that nuclear weapons are immoral because they don't discriminate ignores the fact that if you drop a 500-pound bomb to take out a legitimate enemy target in a neighborhood, you're going to have collateral damage there too. It's merely a question of scale. The principle is exactly the same.
I think.
So
the
why
principle
why
the
is
same.
one acceptable and the other not?
I think I'm looking at some of Article 82 in Vatican II documents, and it says, and it's no, it's actually Article 81, and what it refers to is the arms race and the scientific weapons. I don't think it specifically talks, unless you've got a reference specifically for nuclear,
No,
that
it
it's
may
talking
not.
about the arms race.
He's talking about
It's scientific
how-
weapons.
What it says is the arms race is an utterly treacherous trap for humanity and one which ensnares the poor to an intolerable degree. Okay, it's our clear duty, therefore, to strain every muscle in working for the time when all war can be completely outlawed by international consent. Huh. Okay, in the meantime, efforts which have already been made and are still underway to eliminate the danger of war are not to be underrated. So I think it's talking about what they're calling the scientific, and that's their term, scientific weapons
Right.
that we have at our disposal, that the arms race and the scientific weapons are to be condemned as an
Right.
escalation that should never be used. But I don't think they specifically targeted nuclear weapons.
Right, they may not have, because when I think scientific, and it may have been what the Vatican thought as well, was it'd be nuclear, biological, chemical. So any weapons that aren't, just a typical.
weapons of mass
Well,
destruction.
Well, so a
Sure,
500-pound bomb is a weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, and I think the principle is the exact
Yeah.
same. You're still dealing with the same thing, and I think that the Roman Catholic Church, and when I say Roman Catholic, I really the Church, and it includes any theologian who's a member of the Church, any branch of the Church. The question is going to be, what about the devastation that is wrought by this particular weapon? Can this particular weapon be controlled to the extent that you really can minimize collateral damage? And that you're right, whether it's a 500-pound bomb, whether it's carpet bombing of a city, because all these things were condemned later by the church. The carpet bombing of cities, the indiscriminate use of any weapons. I think the concern with the nuclear weapon is that by its very nature, it is so indiscriminate. And it can wreak such havoc, the world can just be destroyed. And remember, in the 60s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, really, throughout about a 40-year period, this was a very real and present threat, I mean, I took American history, and I heard that back in the 60s,
Tread lightly.
I mean, there was,
Watch it.
I lived
People-
American
there were-
history back
I remember drills of getting under my desk,
right,
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
facing away from the windows.
Sure.
I remember people building bomb shelters.
Yeah.
I remember civil defense. I remember being frightened.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I remember being
Remember
frightened
the
as a
air raid
kid.
sirens?
Oh, yeah.
They got tested all the time.
I remember being frightened
And
as
there was
kid.
a real reason to be frightened, because you had two superpowers that had nuclear weapons pointed at each other.
And they were
Yeah.
pretty intense.
Right, and we were not friends. I mean, so anyway, the historical context certainly informed I think the church's view on just war and how to handle these issues. So it seems like that we were about to talk about something else when we started talking about Vatican II, and I can't remember what anymore. Does anybody remember?
Yeah, I wanted to just talk about Vatican II and the piece, but I also wanted to talk about this international community stuff.
International community.
Yeah. When you get down into the later articles in the papers, it's called, let's see, after it's the avoidance of war, and then it's into setting up an international community.
Right.
There's this one world effort
Yes.
that I think the church embarked upon in that,
Mhm.
which was not there before. And I have to
You're
tell
right.
you, having lived through, I was in high school, and having lived through Vatican II as a Roman Catholic, it was devastating. Because people left the church in droves saying that they're now communists.
Right, right, and your point is very well taken, because the thing that Vatican II does, and really this was already happening before Vatican, Vatican II of course didn't happen in a vacuum, but you see the sort of the fruition of sort of what's going on in the church. But remember that with Augustine and Aquinas, and really with just war thinking throughout the centuries, the idea was the sovereign, the proper sovereign was the nation state.